All right, so returning where I left off last, um, the Osama bin Laden, he was the sort of leader of Al Qaeda during this time, and he was this wealthy Saudi Arabian man, and he actually um, was in support of the U.S. for a while because originally he was part of the Muslim resistance to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Um, because he ended up taking refuge in Afghanistan because they kind of ran him out of Saudi Arabia for a time. So originally, he was actually working with the CIA because this resistance was kind of supported by the CIA. And he switched over and had this different view on the United States because the US during the Persian Gulf War brought a large number of troops into Saudi Arabia, and he didn't like that so many US troops were invading his homeland. So, ever since then, he kind of switched gears and started going against the United States instead of working with them and helping them with that Muslim resistance. And so he sort of is running Al Qaeda, which is a organization all throughout Afghanistan that is similar to the Taliban, but they're two different things. They kind of go hand in hand together. They both kind of have terrorist affiliations and do terrorist attacks towards other countries, specifically really developed countries like the United States, France. Trying to think if there was one in Norway. Yeah, places like that. And even before before the September before the September terrorist attacks, um, they actually had other attacks go on against the United States before this, but this one was kind of the really big one that kind of changed everything and started this war on terror. But before this, they were actually linked to two bombings of US embassies in East Africa in 1998. On top of that, they also did an attack on the American destroyer USS Cole in Yemen in 2000, but it wasn't as big of a deal as the September 11th terrorist attacks. And even before the Bush administration, the Clinton administration knew of Osama bin Laden and his threat to the United States. And so they tried a lot of missile attacks to try and kill him with no success. He was able to evade the United States from capture or assassination for years. And he actually, there was a lot of times where they had an assassination attempt on him, and he would leave that place or that compound literally like an hour before the invasion actually happened. So he kind of got away many, many times during it. And so he was the one that took responsibility and was in the video of Al Qaeda taking responsibility for the 9/11 terrorist attacks. And they published them a few days after they happened. And because of this, it kind of put a face and a name to who to go after for this war on terror and who exactly we should be targeting. And so the Bush administration kind of used that and used the fear to kind of make everyone believe that what they were doing was acceptable and that all of these people needed, you know, to pay for kind of what they did. And Bush actually vowed to punish those responsible, and he vowed to punish anyone who harbored them as well, and making sure that they paid for the crimes. Um, and then eventually, not during the Bush administration, but during the Obama administration, they were able to successfully carry out a mission that ended up assassinating him. It was on May 2nd, 2011, and it was the U.S. Special Forces, and it was 25 Navy SEALs, and he was actually at a compound in Pakistan, and it was said that he sort of had this thought that he wasn't ever going to get captured because when they went to the compound, there's only about 3 guards and there wasn't really a whole lot of security at it. So he kind of thought that he was untouchable and that the U.S. was never going to get him. And the whole event only lasted about 40 minutes for the Navy SEALs to get from the bottom floor to the top where he was with his family. And only 5 people died. It was either 5 or 6 because in Islam they actually said that only 5 people died, but the U.S. said that 6 people died because 1 woman died on the first floor of the compound, but Islam says that a woman did not die and only 5 men died. So 5 men are definitely confirmed to have died in the attack, including one of his sons and then Osama bin Laden himself. And there was a lot of speculation that it wasn't actually him, but there's been, because the U.S. wouldn't release photos of the body just because they wanted to keep it private, and they also thought it was kind of disrespectful. You shouldn't really be posting pictures of dead bodies. But they did publish all the DNA tests that they did, which did confirm that it was him. And so that kind of, in a way, put a stop to the end of terrorism, like the war itself, or the term war on terror. But it didn't actually stop anything. But the Obama administration wanted to make it seem like there wasn't as much of a threat, especially with this assassination. And Obama even himself said that the war on terror is over, just to kind of give it sort of a new name. And so going back to the attacks, after these attacks, this is the picture I mentioned before where President Bush is being told about the attacks first, and he was in an elementary classroom. He was in an elementary classroom when he found out the news. And kind of after this, the U.S. sort of developed this fear. One, they developed a huge fear of flying and of airlines. The economy was already kind of bad, and they sort of blamed the airlines for this. And so then because the airlines went down, the economy also started to worsen because people were too afraid to fly. And the government actually had to give a $15 billion bailout to the airlines. But even with that bailout, many of them had to file for bankruptcy, including United, just so they could continue to operate. But a lot of airlines actually went out of business because of this, because no one wanted to fly. And then also at the airlines themselves, instead of private companies running the airport like screening process and security, it is now run by government officials. So everyone that is at the security checkpoints is a government official instead of just a private security company. That way no one can really get through with anything. And because of that, there's also new security measures. Now a lot of airlines do body scans. You can't carry the certain amount of liquids on airplanes anymore, like anything over 3 ounces you can't carry on your carry-on because it could potentially make a weapon from it. And there's also new like drug dogs that go through the lines to check you. So a lot of new security measures have been added, and not only to the security checkpoints, but also onto the airlines themselves. So now on the inside of airlines, there is a special door that kind of will seal the cockpit so no one can really get inside. If an event like this were to happen again where someone would try something, they seal the doors now so no one can get inside the cockpit. As well, this is when we kind of started the use of having air marshals on it as well. And the air marshals now, they have the ability to carry a weapon on there, and so they're kind of the first line of defense against any attack that were to happen on this. Um, and then after the attacks is Bush kind of launched the invasion into Afghanistan to stop this. And his goal was kind of to destroy Al Qaeda and the Taliban, two of the terrorist groups, and then also to capture or kill Osama bin Laden. And this all started in October 2001, was when the invasion of Afghanistan started. And when they invaded, they relied heavily on like the Northern Alliance and everything. But eventually, it did lead also to the war in Iraq, and they invaded Iraq in 2003. And a lot of people don't know kind of whether all of this was a good thing or not. 6,000 soldiers did die in Iraq and Afghanistan, with even more civilians dying. And this kind of all just led to a huge thing of fear. And that's what the war on terror was really about, was building fear to make government actions seem like they were for the better of the nation. And now that people look back on it, there's a lot of studies whether the war on terror and everything doing to stop it was actually worth it, and if it was actually preventing it. And a lot of them saw that this was actually the cause of terrorism. In a lot of cases, there was more attacks after the Iraq invasion than there were before it. Because, I mean, if someone were to invade the US, which obviously was something similar to the September 11th attacks, we would get upset and retaliate, and that's kind of what these other countries are doing, is they're starting to retaliate. And since it's not necessarily a war, it's more of a campaign in a way, it's really impossible to know how the war is progressing and who is actually winning, because you can't really compare how many people you are stopping compared to how many people they're recruiting. And so that's just sort of like the beginning of how the war on terror started. And it was just really a way to terrify people and use fear to make it seem like the government was looking out for what's best for you. And I'm sure in most ways that they probably were at the time, but it's kind of hard to look at it as just being about one thing. So yeah, these are all of my sources that I used, and thank you for listening.